Greetings. My name is Rhee, and I'm currently a PhD in preaching student at Baylor University's Truett Seminary in Waco, Texas. And this year I'll be presenting a paper entitled, When Shepherds Scatter God's Flock, Understanding Spiritual Abuse in Preaching. And in terms of the title of my paper, I'm drawing from this image that we encounter in Jeremiah 23, where we read about this oracle of judgment pitted against the wicked leaders of Judah for misleading and for harming the people of God. And with that in mind, I first grew interested in this topic just a few years ago, coming out of a season of pastoral ministry where I was reflecting and praying through different ministry experiences that I had, different things I had observed, different things that I had participated in. And the Lord was really, pressing on my heart that there may have very well been moments where I was harmful or even abusive towards my parishioners. And truthfully, it was a very sobering moment, but also one which compelled me to want to research this topic in order to safeguard my ministry, but also to hopefully provide resources for others so that we could just better serve the church at large. And so with that said, I begin my paper with a quote from Parker Palmer. And this is what he writes on the topic of leadership. He says, by failing to look at our shadows, we feed a dangerous delusion that leaders too often indulge, that our efforts are always well-intended, our power is always benign, and the problem is always in those difficult people whom we are trying to lead. And so in many ways, my paper is in fact an invitation to the reader to be reflective and prayerful about one's own ministry. But at the same time, overall, what I state in the paper is that my paper is not meant to be prescriptive, but more so descriptive. An author named Wade Mullen, he says this about abuse. He says, freedom from abuse, it comes first by understanding. And understanding means having the language to identify and talk about your situation. And so in many ways, that's the primary goal of my paper, to provide definitions and categories of language so that moving forward, different homileticians, preachers, lay leaders, so on and so forth would have just different pieces of language to hold on to in order to better discern and to serve their churches. Overall, my thesis is this: spiritual abuse in preaching transpires when the pulpit is leveraged to control and domineer others, commonly occurring through the employment of weaponized, self-promoting, controlling, deceptive, and unspoken words. And to build on this thesis, I divide the paper into two parts. Part one focuses on defining spiritual abuse in preaching. And the way that I do that is first off by unpacking the dynamics of power in the pulpit between preacher and parishioner. Then I begin to explore several definitions of spiritual abuse in the literature. And I work my way towards trying to give a description of how spiritual abuse takes place in the sermonic event. In part two, the final portion of my paper, I propose 5 ways in which spiritual abuse commonly takes place. Of course, the list is not exhaustive, but I do hope and pray that these would serve as categories of language for further discernment and discussion. I talk about weaponized words, where the preacher may very well target different people or individuals through the preaching event. Self-promotion, often tied to deeply embedded insecurity and narcissistic patterns among leaders. Controlling words, deceptive words, and finally, unspoken words. And so altogether, I thank you in advance for reading and interacting with my paper. I really hope and pray that it would be edifying. It would be illuminating in many ways. I look forward to our conversation to discuss this topic, and I pray and I know that it'll be a fruitful conversation. So thank you once again for reading my paper and expressing your interest, and I look forward to meeting you at EHS.